I thought him going after Ted Cruz's wife was bad, but calling him a pedophile? I mean, there's nothing worse than that. Oh my goodness. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to Donald Trump's Truth Social recently, but he's been posting a lot of truths, which is what I call a Truth Social, because it's not a tweet, right? It's not on Twitter, it's on Truth, so it must be a truth. I don't know. Again, by the way, can we also acknowledge just inherently how funny it is that he named his platform Truth? That's pretty funny. But he posted a Truth Social post after Joe Biden's big State of the Union address. And Donald Trump said something that kind of threw me for a loop. It was basically just praise for Joe Biden's speech, complimenting the speech, talking about how it's a great speech, how it's a fantastic speech, and he did pretty good. And people are kind of confused about why he's saying this. Definitely within the same 24-hour time period that he called Ron DeSantis a pedophile on Truth Social. I'm not kidding you. I am not kidding you. In fact, we should probably talk about that first. I already talked about it yesterday on stream, but I guess if this gets posted on YouTube, I should bring it up too. But here's a picture of Donald Trump heavily implying that Ron DeSantis is a pedophile, and that while he was younger, he would go out with high school girls and give them alcohol and give them drunk because he was grooming them. And he quote tweets a post about that and says, wow, he would never do such a thing, heavily implying that he would do such a thing and trying to blast that to his audience. This is how Trump is. When it's his political opponent, he takes the gloves off, but this is the hardest I have ever seen him go against a Republican political opponent. This is absolutely the hardest I have ever seen. And I have not seen anybody besides the most devout Trump acolyte cult members responding to this positively within the Republican Party. I have been responding to this swimmingly, not because somebody who's, again, this is a very low amount of evidence that he's a groomer. Not that somebody with very little evidence is being accused of being a groomer. I'm not happy about that. I'm happy that the Republican primary, if Ron DeSantis decides to run, because that's still up in the air if he runs or not, but the odds every day seems to be in favor of Ron DeSantis running, that it's going to be a bloody primary. Very bloody. Either Donald Trump gets through it, and he's going to be the same guy who's randomly accusing people of being pedophiles, who's calling for the suspension of the U.S. Constitution, who refuses to acknowledge his loss in 2020 and therefore is not going to be correcting the mistakes. That's if he truly believes it. If he doesn't believe it, then he's still going to be dealing with the fact that nobody cares that he lost in 2020 anymore, except his most devout acolytes. Most Americans in 2022 didn't really care about it. They didn't go to the polls to vote for it in 2022. And if you tell somebody, hey, it's all rigged, there's a decent chance they're not going to go out and vote. Because if you think it's rigged, why are you going to go out to vote? And so I talked about this a little bit yesterday on stream, how this is going to see a very bloody Republican primary. And let's say Ron DeSantis wins. Let's say he gets through, which in my opinion, is probably one of the better case scenarios for the Republicans. He's going to get through this with pedophile accusations on his toes possibly, with Trump saying that it was possibly stolen from him, which is going to encourage his supporters, his most diehards, to not go out and vote for Ron DeSantis. There's a million bad things that could happen if Ron DeSantis runs and Trump hammers him like he's done every other candidate. And so far, he's showing that he's willing to go farther. I thought him going after Ted Cruz's wife was bad, but calling him a pedophile? I mean, there's nothing worse than that. Oh my goodness. But anyway, moving on from that, in the same 24-hour time period that Donald Trump called Ron DeSantis a pedophile, he also started praising Joe Biden's speech. Let's see if we can read this. Look, he worked hard tonight. It's not a natural thing for him. It never was, and never will be. But you've got to give him credit for trying. I disagree with him on most of his policies, but he put into words what he felt, and he ended up the evening far stronger than he began. Give him credit for that. Many things weren't mentioned that should have been, but that's for another time. I've done a little clip. Perhaps you'd like to watch it. Good night, everybody. God bless America. He then also went on to say, his wife, Jill, is looking lovely tonight in a beautiful purple dress, clapping and applauding with great enthusiasm. My immediate thought after reading this was not about how insane it is to have Donald Trump accuse Ron DeSantis, the other likely nominee for the Republican Party, of being a pedophile and praise Joe Biden within a 24-hour time period. The first thought I had is, imagine you're Ted Cruz reading this, reading Donald Trump complimenting Jill Biden's looks after he dogged on your wife. I don't know if this was written by Donald Trump. I don't know if this was written by a staffer and the decision was made after Donald Trump accused Ron DeSantis of being a pedophile by the staffers that they're going to hand this over to somebody else. And now they're going to try to temper Donald Trump on social media down if he has any chance of winning the Republican nomination. I don't know if this was genuinely Trump. And this is him possibly coming to the conclusion that I'm not going to win, Ron DeSantis is going to win, so I'm going to sink the party and praise Biden, and maybe I could send some of my supporters his way, or at least not to vote for Ron, or if this is just genuinely his feelings, and he's just so erratic that he's going to call a guy a pedophile in the morning, and then praise his main political opponent in the afternoon. I don't know. I don't know what happened here. But God, I would hate to be Ted Cruz reading these messages. But despite how crazy it is to have Donald Trump saying this stuff or praising Joe Biden or calling Ron DeSantis pedophile, or any of that, he's not wrong. No, well, I don't know if he's wrong about the Ron DeSantis hebephilia, pedophilia, whatever you want to call it stuff. But he's not wrong about Joe Biden's speech. He's not. And he's not the only right-winger to not go out of his way to be like, oh, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who gave the Republican response, was so amazing. I saw it. It was milquetoast. It was boring. And it was mostly just, you know, her pumping herself up, which is kind of the point of a response to the State of the Union, is to help give a rising star, you know, the opportunity to raise their profile. But she was boring, unenthusiastic, and had basically zero charisma, which is strange considering that she was a press secretary. I guess her best skill is sticking to a script, and that's basically it. But moving on, it wasn't just Donald Trump who praised Joe Biden's speech. It was also Nick Fuentes, the Holocaust-denying white nationalist who leads the quote-unquote America First caucus, and had that meeting with Donald Trump with Kanye West, and is somebody who's actively involved in Kanye West's possibly imploding political campaign. We haven't seen him in public. He's kind of disappeared, and it makes me think that his high that he was going off of, because he has a lot of mental health issues, and I think he was, you know, on a high on his bipolar disorder. It makes me think he crashed, and now he's going through a depressive episode behind closed doors. But I have no clue, because I'm not Kanye. But Nicholas Fuentes had some praise for it. First message he put out, Joe Biden over Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I don't think that's him saying he prefers Joe to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, but saying that his speech was very obviously better than Sarah Huckabee Sanders' speech. Nick then says, the GOP rolls out a, oh my God. I got the full one. I only read the last one before the show. I didn't read this one. The GOP rolls out a frumpy hick to give a speech about big government and the troops in 2023. This is all part of the ongoing backward slide back to pre-Trump Republican Party. So out of touch. Biden's speech wasn't actually that bad. Wait, Biden's speech actually wasn't bad. No, he's not even saying it wasn't that bad. It wasn't bad, period. Calling him a demented woke socialist fell flat when 60% of his speech sounds like Trump or better. I don't think so. I will say the one point, I mean, like, he like pointed toward the workers, and he says that sounds like Trump, but that's just because Nicholas Fuentes, like me, is very young, and I think a lot of people don't remember Scranton Joe, you know? They don't remember that, because they weren't paying that much attention to politics at the time, because we were so young. The only time in the speech that Biden sounded like Trump, in my opinion, was when he talked about the bill to deal with the toxic burn pits that poisoned veterans. Great legislation. Very happy the Republicans were bullied eventually into supporting it. But during the statement about it, he said this was the most influential piece of legislation ever. I think he missed a few words, like it was the most influential legislation around burn pits ever, but he just said it was the most influential piece of legislation ever, which sounds like a Trumpism when he said, like, I'm going to cancel all the debt in 4 years, and this is the best thing ever, the best economy ever, the best speech ever, I'm the best president ever for black people. Like, it sounds like a Trumpism. Face the facts. He's not that retarded. He's likable, and he isn't a trans chi-com. That means the GOP actually has to offer a compelling alternative instead of relying on the delusion that Biden is so unpopular. What's not to like? CHIP Act, Buy American, Hire American, sensible position on China, protecting data from big tech, capping price of insulin. He's a Democrat, so there was usual stuff about gun control, abortion, legalization of TPS and Dreamers. Beautiful. But it wasn't so bad. The reality is, by the way, I think Biden, if you want to have my criticism of the speech, I think Biden should have gone harder on abortion. It's a very popular issue. And I say this every time he gives a major speech. Should have come out in favor of drug legalization, marijuana legalization specifically. And definitely now, considering that now the majority of Americans live in states that marijuana is legal in, after 2022, when it was referendum, when it was a referendum issue in multiple states, including mine. We actually voted to legalize marijuana in my state. Very proud about that. Very happy about that. Now is the time for the federal government to get involved. This is the time, like, hey, the majority of Americans, we're moving towards getting these people out of prison and not burdening cops, and with this extra work that's completely unnecessary, arresting people who just want to put something in their own body. Whether you disagree with it or not, it's not really your business. But these... and of course, like, helping these people, like, not going to prison for, you know, putting something in their own body. But, like, of course, that's like the usual criticism. But let's continue. That's the usual criticism I always give. But it wasn't so bad. The reality is that between the consolidation of allies around Ukraine and the Biden coup against Trump, the regime has actually put up a very effective counter to the Trump revolution. I don't know what he means with the Biden coup against Trump. I think that's like just election denialism, maybe. And I'm happy that Nick Fuentes doesn't like Ukraine. He's a big supporter of Russia. He supported Trump, who was a loser in 2022 and couldn't accept it. Now he's supporting another loser in 2023 and possibly can't accept it. Either way, Donald Trump, Nick Fuentes coming out and endorsing Joe Biden's speech, maybe not endorsing it, but basically giving it light praise. This is from the same people who have been endlessly railing against Joe Biden. But maybe they could more just, you know, read the room temperature. You know, they could read the room better, because the majority of Americans seem to agree that his speech was good. And the people who watched it, this is the polling data that is currently available. 71% of speech watchers believe, after watching the speech, that Biden's policies is moving the country in the right direction, while only 29% think it's moving the country in the wrong direction. Now, some people are going to say, well, that's just because all the people who watched it are all Democrats. Okay, well, let's go back to this. And I don't even need to go find the image. It's right here on CNN. Biden's economic policies moving in the right direction. Pre-speech, the speech watcher said 50%. After speech, and this is a difficult thing to convince people on, just because of the old, like, kind of like back in our mind belief that a lot of Americans have, wrongfully, in my opinion, oh, that Republicans are the great money managers. Even though Donald Trump increased the deficit by like an astronomical amount. I thought Joe Biden's section where he said that 25% of the current deficit is just from 4 years, Donald Trump's 4 years. I thought that was a really, like, good attack strategy, considering that people, you know, always assume that Republicans are the best at managing the economy. But if you cut taxes for the rich, but then increase defense spending, you know, there's going to be a deficit that comes with that. So 50% pre-speech thought that that Joe Biden was moving the country in the right direction economically. Post-speech, 66%. That is a 16-point jump. This isn't saying, oh, I thought his speech was okay. That would be good, but this is even better. This is saying that the speech convinced double digits, 16% of the people who watched the speech, that his economic policies were moving in the right direction. If the Joe Biden who made this speech runs in 2024 and continues to make speeches like this moving forward, if he can keep his composure, they fumbled a little bit, but nobody really cared. This was the best speech of his presidency. Even better than the few other speeches that I pointed out. I said, oh, that was pretty good. This is the best one. If he can do this moving forward, he can win 2024 Honestly, and if he keeps this up, he could win pretty smoothly in 2024. Pretty smoothly. So I really hope he keeps up this pressure. And I think this really, for anybody who had like naysaying about like, oh, Biden can't run again in 2024, he's too old. I really feel like this dispelled a lot of that. The polling data especially has dispelled a lot of that. This Joe Biden, I hope, is the one that wins in 2024. Donald Trump knows that this would be a challenge to run against somebody like this. Nick Fuentes knows it. The people who are watching the speech know it. And the people who were watching with the speech knew it was a good speech and seemed to have been convinced by his arguments on the national stage. I am surprised with how good that speech went. Obviously, as a more progressive person, I have some problems with it. Weed legalization, I think he could have used the opportunity to go harder on abortion. I really do. He got really loud at one section, but I think he could have gotten loud at that section and would have been more effective, because then when Republicans got angry about it, it would have been like, wow, they really want to do a national abortion ban, huh? But I think that he dealt with the heckling quite well. And that's the thing that really gets me about the speech. And this is what I'll wrap this section up on. I thought the heckling today would be disastrous. And you want to know what? That was the most heckling we have ever seen during a State of the Union. Ever. Period. Like, it was loud. It was rowdy. I wasn't around for this. I mean, I was alive, but I wasn't that involved in politics. But I remember, well, I don't remember, but I have read about how much of a scandal it was when one politician, like, stepped up during Obama's State of the Union and yelled, and it was like, oh, that's a scandal. Now it was like basically half of the Republican Party standing up, just yelling like, rah, 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 just like rabble-rousing. Marjorie Taylor Greene, as always, gets out of her seat. She takes out her fat fingers and just starts yelling at the top of her lungs. She was yelling so loud, screeching so loud that I could tell her voice apart from the crowd of like the other 50 to 100 Republicans who were coping and seething. By the way, I don't know if you noticed, but did you see that she was wearing like a $500 fur coat? Very populist, very populist. Very Huey Long-esque. Anyway, I know some people in my chat yesterday was like, Dylan, the speech wasn't that good. The majority of people who watched it disagree with you. The people who hate Biden the most seem to disagree with you. And I honestly think that you're coping. If that's the view you still have of the speech. You can personally not like the speech and still acknowledge that it hit on all the points he needed to hit on perfectly, and it had an impact. Hopefully, this is the Joe Biden we see in 2024.